Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. So we're going to conclude our 9-part series in lessons learned from spending a weekend with some of the most amazing creators I've ever had the honor, the privilege to spend some time with. If you guys are just tuning into this episode for the very first time, you're not familiar with what this series was, go back and listen to the previous 8 episodes. I kind of walk through what this was, but in short, I was invited to an event to go spend a weekend with some amazing people who have massive YouTube followings and podcasts and things like that. And so we got together and got to learn and grow and share stories. And over the last 8-9 episodes, now this is episode number 9, I've been sharing my lessons learned from being around these amazing people, some observations that I made. And today's lesson is actually one that I spoke about on the podcast actually a couple of weeks ago, and I did an article on called, what's it called? Life Billionaires. I think it's anthonyvicino.com/life-billionaires. Anyways, the thing that stood out to me about these guys and the gals was that they were all wildly successful, and many of them had won the money game in a meaningful way, but many of them hadn't. Like, there's a difference between being a creator and being like an entrepreneur, and sometimes the creators have a hard time monetizing their audiences, so they might have millions and millions of subscribers, but they might not be particularly well off in the money game. And so even though you see somebody with a big, massive following, don't just assume that they're well off, because in a lot of cases, one of the things I'm realizing is that they're not necessarily. Now, with that said, regardless of where these guys were on their journey of like winning the money game, the money itself was not the motivating factor for literally any of them. Literally none of them cared about pursuing money for the sake of money. They were interested in like, how do I do this better? Like, how can I improve? But over and over, we were having conversations about how they wanted to monetize, but in the right way. They didn't want to just go shilling some crappy product that they knew that they could sell to their audience and make money off of, but they didn't want their brand associated with that, or they wanted to make sure that it brought a certain type of value to their audience. And so I was really impressed by how thoughtful they were about how they thought about this act of exchanging value for money with their audience. Now, it's interesting because I think a lot of people, when they set off to be a creator or they set off to be an entrepreneur, we do it because we want something different for our lives. It might be that you want a different W-2, like you're tired of working in the cubicle, so you want out of that. For me, I wanted out of the van that I was living in. I wanted to win the money game. It was a very definitive thing for me because, as that cliche goes, money doesn't solve all your problems, but it does solve all your money problems. And the truth is that many of life's most fundamental problems, like food, shelter, and safety, they can be solved with money. And so I think it's important that we win the money game at least up to a certain level, but recognize that beyond that certain level, money itself isn't terribly interesting. It's not terribly motivating. And if you are one of those people who's just pursuing money for the sake of money and like putting score on the board and like going, you can just never turn it off, like, you're going to find yourself on this hamster wheel of life where you never really feel content or fulfilled because there is no end, right? Like, there's always more money to be had out there. And so if that's the thing that you're chasing, you're gonna be chasing it forever. And on the one hand, it's good to play infinite games that you're just rewarded for playing, and that's great. But one of the things I found from hanging out with these guys was that each and every one of them was trying to tap into their highest purpose in life. They were trying to live purpose-driven lives in particular. And when I think about what it means to live a purpose-driven life, it returns me to this idea that you cannot consume your way to fulfillment. It can only be created. And money is really nothing else other than an IOU. It is a form of a value exchange that lets you consume something in the future, right? But the act of creating, whether that's a video, an article, or just a business, like a product, an idea, that is where true fulfillment comes in. And it was just so rewarding to be around these guys who their priority in life was to leave a massive impact and to say, like, what's the value that I can bring to the world? What's the change that I can influence? And this is important to me. It's the reason why this podcast is called Amplified Impact, because when I was living in the back of that van, over a decade ago, I was writing science fiction and fantasy novels, and I thought that's what I wanted to do with my life. And I wrote 12 of those, and they did very well, and I could have kept pursuing that. But at a certain point, I realized for myself that I didn't feel like I was tapping into my greatness by just writing stories about robots and lasers and things that go boom. I was giving people the means to escape their life. I was bringing entertainment and sometimes a deep connection with the characters in the story. And those are very important things. I'm not trying to just take away from the importance of story. But for me, I felt as though I wasn't sharing things that was actually going to help people improve their lives. If anything, it was going to help distract them from their lives. And so that wasn't the impact that I wanted to make on the world. And that was one of the conscious reasons why over the last few years I got away from the fiction and the fantasy and just started writing more about my experiences and sharing my story and sharing frameworks that have helped me along the way, because I recognize, regardless of if you have ADHD or you just struggle with distraction, or you're an entrepreneur, or you're a W-2 worker who's just not content with where you are in life, or you're in a relationship and things just aren't going how you want them to, and like you just know that you're meant for so much more. I want to help create a community of people that realize like you're not in it together, you're not weird for going through these things. You're not the only one struggling, that we all experience it, and that regardless of where you are in the game, there's always levels to these things. But that feeling of being an imposter and feeling like you're still not really tapped into your greatness, it never really goes away, because what happens is your capacity for greatness just continues to expand, right? Like the rooms that you get into, the people that you surround yourself with, it just continues expanding. And so this is something that was just reinforced for me again that weekend with those creators, and seeing it in reality, like people who I looked up to and say like they're further along in this creator journey than me, and realizing they don't have it any more together than anybody else, but that they are committed to a life of impact and a life of purpose. And in that, they find fulfillment more so than anybody I've ever met who just was in it for the money. And so this is like the personification of the whole life billionaire concept, which I wrote about. And again, like go check out that article. I believe it's anthonyvicino.com /life-billionaires. That's not very helpful. Just go to anthonyvicino.com /blogs and it'll be there. Sorry, I don't know the URL off the top of my head. But anyways, I hope this brings you a little bit of value. I hope this series of lessons learned from this creator event was valuable for you, that you got some kind of insight or some nugget that you can go and apply into your own day, your own life. And I would love to hear, of these 9 lessons that we shared over the last 9 days, which ones were the most impactful for you? Which ones were you like, that one hit home? Do me a favor, leave a review, or find me on Twitter at Anthony Vicino, or on Instagram at the Anthony Vicino. Shoot me a DM, leave me a comment. Let me know like what was the most valuable lesson that we took away from this event together. So as always, guys and gals, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again tomorrow for another episode. But until then, stay hyper focused, my friend.